Okay, from here, we are just about done. Now remember when I said I wanted to have parts of my component configurable? Now we've already added in the minimum year and the maximum year. And if I go in here into the calendar, right, and I have on my date picker UI, I now have min year, I got max year, and I've got my date picker ID. I want to add in one more configuration for the accent color. And right now we are arbitrarily, we've got this colored purple, we've got our selection colored purple, and we have our buttons colored purple in the quick selection. I would like to abstract this so that way this color purple is something that I can set on the component and then it propagates down to all of the items when the component starts. So let's do this. Let's go back into our component here and let's copy our purple because we need that from our design. So let's click on this guy right here. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to make a variable. And this will be called accent color. I'm Canadian. I spell color with a U. Deal with it. I'm going to use this third option. It's not going to be a number type or a text type. It's going to be a color type. And what's nice about this is this will give me a color picker in the sidebar for the override. Now, I definitely want this overrideable. And I'm going to default it to the purple color that I have in here. So it's still going to be this default color. I'm already sending this initialization. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to add this into this initialization receive. And I'm going to update the colors of all these things. So I want this arrow that I've got here. So here, let's close this quick select. The next month and the previous month, I want to change their color. Now they came through and they're currently uneditable. So let's make them editable. Now an interesting quirk by me doing that, notice how I've lost their touch area. And I don't know why that happens, but I want to make sure I put that back. So touch area is going to be not the same all the way around. 10 on the bottom, 15, or 10 on the top, 15 on the sides, 10 on the bottom. So now this will give me my touch area back. And now these are editable shapes where I can change their color. So let's add in our init over here. Let's use a color response. Color on previous month. I'm going to set the fill color and I'm going to choose that accent color variable. And like I've done before, I want to move this up to the top of my list and have it sit, I'm going to put it right at the top. So this is going to be our prev month chevron, and I don't want the duration on here. I don't want this to be animated. I want this to be immediate. Duplicate this for next month. I'm going to duplicate this again for my cancel button. So the cancel button's outline and text color. So that's the cancel button base. And let's make that editable. So let's go through in our quick select and let's make all of the button elements editable. So the done button and the cancel button, let's make all 4 of these, make them editable. Okay, so now let's go back here to our init. So the base's border color is once again going to use the accent color. Say okay to that. And this is cancel button. And when I have things inside like this, I like to use this arrow just so that way, because I've got multiple shapes named base. And I want the text color for the cancel button. So let's duplicate this, but not on the base, but on the cancel buttons text, the text on here, and not the border, but this will be the text color. And we'll change this to the accent color. And I also want to change the base color of the done button. So let's duplicate this one because this is more similar to what we need. And instead of the base on the cancel button, I'm going to change the base on the done button. And it'll be done button, base, and I don't want to change the border, I want to change the fill color. Say okay to that. Okay, so this is going to do most of what we need. So let's go back into our scene. And I'm going to preview this and, let's go back into our scene and let's configure this to be a different color. So let's make this pinky kind of color here. It's pinky red. And if I select this, I should get red on here. And if I do my quick select, there we go. I'm getting red on my buttons, which is great. But my selection here is still purple. This is a bit more complicated, and the reason for this is these are inside my child components, and I can't just update the child components directly. So I need to send the message. Well, I'm already sending this init message. Remember how I said that this was actually going to send a bit more information than just the date picker ID. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send both the date picker ID and I'm going to send the color as well. So let's change this. Let's change this into an array. So I can do all of these at once, by the way. So click on one, hold down Shift, click on the last one, and let's change this to be an array. So I'm going to open with the square bracket, plus date picker ID, plus quote, comma, quote, plus, and then I'm going to use the accent color. So let's choose accent color. And then I'm going to say plus to this, and I'm going to finish my bracket here. And if I wanted to send any other initialization information, I can just piggyback on top of this message and just keep adding indexes to my array of initialization options. So I'm going to say OK to that. Let's go into our calendar day component over here. I'm receiving that init from parent. And right now I'm assigning that directly to date picker ID, but this is no longer what I want to do because I have two things in this. So I need to, in the interim, I need to assign this to a temporary variable and then use index 0 for the date picker ID and index 1 for the color. So let's make a variable. And this is going to be init data, short for initialization data. Remember, it needs to be text. And let's send this to init data. I'm going to need a variable for the accent color, and I'm going to call this selected color inside the component because that's its function inside this component. So let's make a variable, selected color. This is going to be a color, and it's going to be that purple, which I still had copied, but if you didn't have it, you can just copy it from your design again. So by default, this is going to be that purple. And remember, I like to have these sitting at the top of my list. So that one and date picker ID, I'm going to have those at the top of the list. And now, right here, the first index is still the date picker ID. So I'm going to assign to date picker ID. And that's going to be the first index of this init data variable. Say parse JSON. Init data, comma 0. Say OK to that. And let's duplicate this, and this will be not date picker ID, but this is going to be selected color. And I'm going to change this to the second index. And let's say, let's assign date picker ID. And this will be assign selected color. Okay, and now I just need to use it. So down here where I've got this background fill, when it goes into selected, I am explicitly using that purple color, but instead I am not going to use that color. So let's clear this, and instead let's use the variable selected color. All right, let's go back to our calendar over here, and let's see, let's make sure we haven't broken anything. Let's select the date, and now we should get that. Oh, we messed up something. Okay, what did we mess up? Notice how everything is now 1. So here, let's... Okay, all of my dates are 1. Why do you suppose that is? Let's go back into our date picker component. And we have a bunch of things that are happening at start. Most importantly to pay attention to, we're sending initialization to self. This is now being received over here. At the same time, we're telling it to generate our month list. This is happening at the same time as this. But this is happening after this send initialization. We're generating the month list before the child components get a chance to know what their date picker ID should be. So I'm going to do a couple of things here. First of all, I would like to organize this better. So I'm going to take this generate year list. I'm going to put it up here. Now, it doesn't really matter, technically speaking, where this is, but again, I like to think about this in a top down. So this to me is part of the initialization. And in fact, let's copy this, put it here, and let's initial setup. And then this generate month, I want to make sure that I delay this so that way all of this stuff has a chance to finish. Now, I mean, I could delay this by 0.01, but I want to be absolutely sure, so I'm going to delay it by 0.1 seconds. This is still going to appear pretty instant to our eyes, but this is an eternity as far as computers are concerned. So this is just going to guarantee that this is enough time. Now when we go back to our calendar, and I click on this, there we go. Now this is now working, and I have my selection color working exactly as I wanted. So there we go. Now, if I do this right away, you can't see it here because it's hidden. But if I have this in here, and let's say this component was supposed to be visible when the scene starts. In fact, let's actually do that in the scene. Let's have it visible when it starts, right? And if I preview this, okay, so you saw for a split second, you saw all the ones in there. I want to hide that. I don't like that I can see the construction of it, and I don't like that I could see January 2024 in here. So let's do something right here. I have a start trigger here, and this says start after the jump. And I want to leave that as is, so start after jump. But I'm going to have a second start trigger, and this is going to start with the jump. And the difference between start after jump and with jump is the with jump will start immediately as the scene starts. And I'm going to do a couple of things. One, I'm going to clear the text of this in here so that way it's empty by default. And two, I'm going to hide this days group until the first generation is done. So let's do that. Let's add a start trigger. So add trigger, start. Right there, start. This one is going to be with jump. You can have multiple start triggers. Start, and this will be with jump. And I'm going to put this, again, I like this visually. I like to have this at the top because this is technically going to happen first before this. And let's use a text response on the selected month. And I'm going to use a formula here. To set something to empty, you need to use a formula and just use two double quotes like this with nothing in between. Clear selected month. And this will only be temporary because when we generate our month, so if we go here, we look at month generation, then the first thing it does is it updates this. And then I'm also going to set the opacity on this days group to 0. So opacity of days, and I'm going to set it to 0. And I'm going to have this not animated. All right, and then in my month generation, I'm going to show it. So let's just take this, copy this, and I'm going to put it here. Now I'm going to get rid of this delay send because we technically don't need that anymore. But I'm going to set the opacity here up to 100. You can set this animated if you like, and I think for the initial one, I think it's nice to have it animated, so I'm going to set this up to 0.2. This little bit of documentation is no longer necessary because it's not applicable. And down here, these guys no longer need to be delayed. Remember how we set this up to be delayed? So we wanted to make sure that this send happened after our days per month was updated. Well, we've changed where it sits. Before we had it sitting up here underneath the receive, but above all of our conditions, meaning that all of these responses, so these 3 responses, are executed at the same time as these conditions. But the responses underneath the conditions are happening an execution tick, a frame, if you will, after these conditions have been evaluated. Well, we've now moved these sends underneath the condition, meaning that these will now execute at the same time as all of these ones, and now our vertical order of precedence will take over. These will get updated before we send this. These no longer need to be delayed. Right? You can leave it like this, not hurting anything, but there's technically no longer a need to delay these. So let's go back into our home here, and we should now be able to see this working exactly as we like. And notice how, there we go, we see it. We don't see the construction anymore. Okay, now we did notice there's a little bit of a blip. You see it there. You see it a couple of times. You see it in the items over here. Notice how, did you see that? For a split second, we're seeing the 4 flash in here. And that's a bit of an anomaly of how we've set things up. So if we go back into our calendar day, and we have this condition, is selected day. And remember, when no day in that month is selected, the value for selected day is -1. This condition can be met for the last of our hidden items before the start date, because the calculation, 1 plus index minus start day, will evaluate to -1, which will be the same as the value of selected day. So I'm going to add a little bit into this one in here, and I'm only going to restrict this to when selected day doesn't equal -1. So I'm going to add a plus in here, and selected day does not equal -1. So basically, this is only going to color the background of an item as long as it's a valid selected day. If the selected day is -1, it's just not even going to do this at all. So it'll only do it for a visible item. Now we're not going to have that blip. So if we go back over here, and if I go left and right, now we're not seeing that blip. If I turn that up, there we go. So now only a visible one can ever be selected. All right, one more thing I'd like to clean up, and that's the fact that I can see this debug layer here. So let's just go into our component, and I'm just going to turn off the layer. I'm just going to just set it to invisible like this. I may want to, let's say I go and I make some changes to this to extend its capability. I may want to use this debug so to figure out if things are going wrong. So I'm not going to remove it. I'm just going to hide it. So that way from in here, now I don't have it in my list anymore. So there we go. Now my component is fully finished. And let's set our component back to hidden by default here. My component is done. It's fully complete. This is usable for a number of different use cases. But the one problem I have is it's only in this one pie here. I want to set this up as a component that I can upload into a team library. In order to do that, I can take this component and I can click on it and I can say upload. And that's what this icon is right here. So I'm going to upload this, and I'm going to make a new library. So you can select what library it goes to, or you can make a new one. So I'm going to say create a new library, and I'm going to call this UI component library. I'm going to assume that you're probably going to have more UI components you're going to want to add to this library later. So that's why I'm making this a generic UI component library name. You can call it anything that makes sense to you. You might have different brands, so you can say this is brand A component library, brand B component library, whatever you want to do. And important, because I want this to be shared with other people on my team, I want to choose team. And you need to choose the team that it's going to go to. I have access to 3 teams. You might only have access to 1, but you want to upload it to the team that's going to use it. So I'm going to leave this on customer learning. And you can add a description here as well. Now, this is going to automatically upload this one with it because it's part of this component, but you know, I don't want to take any chances, so I'm just going to make sure they're both selected, and I'm going to say create. What this is going to do, this is going to create a new library. Okay, and now at this point, if I click export, it's going to upload these items into this library, and I can choose to publish this right away. Now there's a difference between saving to a library and publishing the changes in that library. If I just leave this unchecked, this will upload this into the library, but nobody will be able to use it yet because I haven't published those changes yet. So I'm going to leave this unchecked. I'm going to show you what you need to do in order to publish if you didn't check it here. So let's say export. Okay, and let's just make a new pie here. So I'm going to hit this little plus. And there should be a library under Team Component Libraries, this one here called UI Component Library. But notice how it's empty. Because I'm the one who made this library, I also have edit access to this library. So with the library selected here, I can hit this little 3 dots, and I can go to Edit Library. And this will now open up the component library over here, and I can make changes to it. And I'm going to make 2 changes. Number 1, whenever you make a new component library, for some reason it makes this empty one called component 1. I'm just going to delete it. I'm going to get rid of it. So right click and delete. Second thing I want to do before I publish this is I want to make sure that anyone who uses this knows how to use it. And that's what this component guide is over here. So notice how I've got this component selected over here. And if I hit this little pencil icon, if I click on that, I'm going to get a way that I can document this component. And I'm going to call this customizable date picker component. And you can use Markdown in here. So let's add a line on here. Listen for, and this is going to be, what's the name of the message we called it? I think it's selected date. Listen for selected date. We're going to document this further anyway, but in my Markdown here, I'm going to say listen for selected date message to get selected date in standard. And once again, I'm going to use Markdown. Your year format. And notice how when I click off there, the Markdown is applied here. And now I'm going to document how I can customize it. So this one is going to be if there are multiple date picker components in your scene, set each to have a unique value for, and I call this, use Markdown again, so date underscore picker underscore ID, so that they do not conflict with each other. Okay, min year, this is the minimum year in the quick select modal. And then this one here, same thing, maximum year in the quick select modal. And accent color changes the color of the following elements in the date picker. And again, I can use Markdown in here. So asterisk is for a bullet. So this will be the next previous chevrons. This will be buttons in the quick select modal. And then selected date background. All right. Now, it also has you document these messages. Because these are broadcast to the scene, technically I can listen for these in the scene and do something with them if I wanted to, but I don't really want people to do that. So I'm going to say used internally by component. I'm going to copy this because there'll be a couple of messages like this. Send this message directly to the component copy to have it reset to one of 2 states. And once again, I'm going to use bullets here. If no date has been selected, the system month and year. If a date has been selected, the month and year of the selected date. All right, date picker set day, once again, used internally by the component. And this sent to parent when a date is selected. Formatted in the standard year, month, day format. And there we go. Now my component is fully documented. So I'm going to close that And I'm going to save. Now, once again, this is just saving the changes to my library, but I haven't published the change yet. I still need to publish it. So notice it's giving me a notification down here I can publish, or I can just hit the publish button up here. And now I have a chance to document what this publish change is. Added and documented date picker component. And I'm going to say publish. And now if I go back to that new pie I started, in a moment we should see, there it is. Now we have this date picker component. And all I have to do is drag this in. And if I've never used this component before, so now I'm going to take a look at my local components, and I can see components used in this pie. And notice how I have component guide over here, and I can now learn how to use it. And I can read up here, and this will tell me how to configure it and any messages that I can send to or receive from this component. And there we go. That is the completed tutorial for how to make a reusable date picker component. And I really appreciate working in this way. On your team, there's going to be some of your designers who are much better at ProtoPie than others. So those designers can help out the less advanced designers by building out these functional components for them. Meanwhile, the less advanced designers can just use these components as is without really knowing exactly how it's been built inside. Hopefully, this will encourage them to learn a bit more so they can start making their own, and you as the more advanced designer can certainly be a mentor towards them. But this will just make your life easier if you build out a library of standard components that your UI always uses and build out all the functionality inside them, so that way other designers can just use them as is and they don't have to spend time creating them. This is going to make your team very efficient in their prototyping. While I'm stopping here, there are lots of ways this component can be improved. You could configure the year and month with an override at start or with a message during execution. You could pre-fill the selected date, again with an override or with a message, or maybe both. Maybe you can make the quick selection more usable. Currently, it doesn't support inertial scrolling on mobile when using a paging container. How might you do this with a scrolling container instead? It would be nice if I could tap on any visible item in the list and have it scroll to it. Currently, it doesn't do that. Also, we put in a minimum and a maximum year, but if we click on our chevrons to go a month forward or a month back, it's possible to go beyond the minimum or the maximum years with the chevrons. You might want to put some guardrails in place to prevent that. You might want to try making a version of this which allows you to select the date range rather than just a single date. I encourage you to experiment with everything you've learned in this tutorial and extend the capabilities of this component to better suit your needs. As always, ProtoPie leaves so much room to create any interaction you like, and this component is no different. It meets my goals, but it might not meet yours, so keep plugging away until it does. Till next time, happy prototyping!